I want to tell you about the day my husband's lawyer leaned in and whispered something that made Daniel's confident face go completely pale. His hands started trembling, and the papers he'd been so eager to sign were shaking like leaves in a storm. After 3 years of careful planning, I finally allowed myself to smile. Let me explain how a woman everyone thought had given up actually played the longest game of revenge imaginable. My name is Sophia Martin, and I'm 34 years old. Until recently, I was married to Daniel Wilson for 15 years. That's longer than most relationships last, longer than some small countries have existed, and definitely longer than my patience should have lasted. But I'm a stubborn woman, and I get that quality from my grandmother. We met when I was 17. I'd graduated high school early, not because I was some genius, but because I was practical and motivated and really wanted to get out of my parents' house. I got a job at a law firm as a file clerk, earning minimum wage and collecting paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I'd worked my way up to legal assistant because I was good with details and numbers, and I knew when to keep quiet and when to pay attention. Daniel was 24 when we crossed paths at a client event. He was charming and ambitious, constantly talking about building a real estate empire, like success was already waiting for him to claim it. He said he was going to create something incredible, and I joked that I'd help him with the paperwork. We married when I was 19, and our son John arrived when I was 20. I continued working part-time at the law firm while raising him, steadily building my retirement account and saving every dollar I could spare. My grandmother always insisted that a woman should maintain her own finances, not secret money, she'd clarify, just her own, something nobody could take away. She was the smartest woman I ever knew. When Daniel's business finally took off at 23, he asked me to quit the law firm and work for him full-time. He needed someone reliable to manage the books, handle clients, and coordinate with contractors, someone he could trust completely. So I became his unpaid everything. I managed bookkeeping, office operations, client relations, interior design for model homes, marketing coordination, and event planning, all while raising John and running our household. My official title was wife, but unofficially, I was everything else that kept his business running. For 11 years, I poured everything into building Daniel's dream. And for 11 years, he took all the credit. At industry events, I was introduced as Daniel's wife. At celebrations, he thanked his team, his mentors, and his vision, but somehow never quite got around to mentioning my contributions. Somewhere along the way, things shifted. He started making decisions without consulting me, staying late at work more frequently, and criticizing small things like how I dressed, what I cooked, and my supposed lack of ambition. This coming from a man whose entire back office I was running for free while raising his child and organizing his life. Then, 3 months ago, he dropped the bombshell. He came home on a Tuesday evening while I was making his favorite dinner, sat me down at the kitchen table with this businesslike look on his face, and announced he wanted a divorce. Then he calmly stated that he wanted the house, the cars, the business, everything. I could keep John, he said, like he was ordering from a menu, taking the assets, and leaving the child like he was a leftover pizza nobody wanted. 15 years of marriage ending at our kitchen table between the salt shaker and butter dish, with me being discarded like just another inconvenient item. What I didn't realize in that moment, what I wouldn't find out until later, was that Daniel had been planning this for months. He already had an expensive, experienced lawyer named William Lopez and had been building his exit strategy while I was meal prepping and scheduling his dental appointments. I'd been completely blindsided by someone I'd trusted with everything. The next day, his mother, Elizabeth, arrived with her perfectly styled hair and practiced sympathy face. She patted my hand and told me I should have tried harder to keep him happy. Men have needs, dear, she said, like she was explaining something complicated to a slow child. This was rich, coming from a woman whose own husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course specifically to avoid being in the same room as her. But sure, I was the problem. That first week felt like drowning. Daniel moved me to the guest room and had documents drawn up with settlements proposed and timelines established. Everything was moving so fast and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Everyone saw a woman whose world had collapsed, a wife being thrown away after 15 years of service, a victim who never saw it coming. But here's what Daniel didn't know, what nobody knew. 3 years earlier, I'd found something buried in his financial records. something he thought was hidden forever, and I'd been quietly, patiently preparing ever since. Within a week of the announcement, Daniel had completely taken control. The guest room became my permanent space in what used to be our home. My walk-in closet shrank to 2 small sections he graciously allowed me to keep. The message was crystal clear that this wasn't my house anymore. Within 2 weeks, he started bringing her around. Emma Martinez was 27 years old and worked at his company naturally. She had that perfect look with blonde highlights, perfect nails, and expensive yoga pants. She walked into my kitchen like she owned the place and wore my grandmother's apron while making smoothies in my blender. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but apparently she made amazing smoothies, so I guess that counted for something. Daniel paraded her around like a trophy. They'd sit on my couch, watch my television, and eat off my plates while he put his arm around her right in front of me like I was furniture that had already disappeared from his field of vision. The humiliation escalated daily. First, he canceled my personal credit card, claiming we needed to separate finances like he was being reasonable. Then, the joint card disappeared. Then he suggested I should probably find somewhere else to stay while we sorted things out. I was being asked to leave my own home. Elizabeth came over to help me pack, which really meant she went through my belongings with a critical eye and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes were fine, some family photos were acceptable, but she hesitated over my grandmother's recipe box like she was considering claiming it for herself. What I was not allowed to take was any jewelry Daniel had bought me over 15 years, any furniture I'd personally selected, anything of real value. Those were marital assets, Elizabeth explained in her condescending tone, and Daniel was entitled to them. She packed my things in garbage bags, not boxes, like I was trash being removed from the premises. Through all of this chaos, I had one person I thought I could trust completely. Charlotte Taylor had been my friend since high school, 20 years of friendship through boyfriends and breakups and babies and everything life had thrown at us. She was the first person I called after Daniel's announcement, and she was incredibly supportive, always checking in and asking how I was holding up and always ready to listen with a sympathetic ear. She'd come over with wine and let me cry on her shoulder, telling me I deserved so much better and that Daniel was making a huge mistake he'd regret forever. But something felt off, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. Little things started adding up. Daniel seemed to know my plans before I'd even finalized them in my own mind. When I casually mentioned to Charlotte that I was thinking about fighting for the house, John came home the very next day saying his dad told him it wouldn't work out. When I told Charlotte I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Daniel made pointed comments about that exact area being too expensive for someone in my situation. Then one day, it suddenly clicked into place, and I felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Looking back through the years, I should have noticed it long ago. The way Charlotte always lit up like a Christmas tree when Daniel walked into any room. The way she'd compliment him just a little too enthusiastically and laugh at his jokes just a little too hard, even when they weren't particularly funny. She always asked about him first whenever we talked on the phone. How's Daniel doing? How's the business going? Is Daniel happy these days? She'd been carrying a torch for my husband for 15 solid years, and Daniel, because he collected admirers like some people collect stamps or coins, knew exactly how to use that devotion to his advantage. He made her feel special and important and different from other women. He probably implied they'd get together after the divorce was finalized, gave her just enough hope and attention to keep her loyal and reporting back to him. My best friend of 2 decades had become his personal spy and informant. 20 years of genuine friendship sold out for some casual flirting and empty promises from a man who used everyone around him. At least she could have charged more for her services. But the worst part wasn't Daniel or his manipulative mother Elizabeth or even my traitorous friend Charlotte. The worst part was watching what was happening to John. My son saw everything happening around him. He saw the girlfriend moving into our home, saw his grandmother packing my bags like I was being evicted, saw the way his father looked at me like I was absolutely nothing, like I didn't even exist anymore. And Daniel was working on him constantly, dripping poison in his ear day after day with carefully crafted lies. Your mom is making this whole situation difficult and complicated. I just want everyone to be happy and move forward. She's the one dragging this out unnecessarily. I'm trying to be fair and reasonable, but she won't cooperate with anything. John started pulling away from me gradually. He wasn't angry exactly, just distant and confused and uncertain. He didn't know who to believe anymore, and his father was very, very convincing with his reasonable tone and logical sounding explanations. I could lose the house and that would be painful. I could lose the money and that would hurt. I could lose everything I'd spent 15 years building and that would be devastating. But watching my son look at me like I was the problem, like I was the villain in this story, that was the knife that actually drew blood. That was the wound that went deepest. I hired a lawyer named Sophia Robinson who'd been highly recommended by people at my old firm. She was 52 years old, sharp as a razor blade, with absolutely no tolerance for nonsense or games. She carefully reviewed my entire situation and laid out the battle plan with military precision. "You helped build this business from the ground up," she said firmly. "You're legally entitled to half of everything, including the house, the company, and all the accounts. We're going to fight this hard." I looked at her for a long, considered moment. "What if I don't want to fight?" I asked quietly. Sophia stared at me like I'd started speaking in some alien language she couldn't comprehend, like I'd suggested we send Daniel a thank you card and a fruit basket for ruining my life. She thought I was broken, depressed, too beaten down emotionally to stand up for myself and my rights. She had absolutely no idea what was really happening behind the scenes. I moved into a small apartment with John, 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom with a kitchen the size of my old pantry. Half our boxes didn't even fit in the limited space and sat stacked in the corner of John's room like monuments to how far we'd fallen from our previous life. Meanwhile, Daniel was posting photos online with Emma, gushing about his new chapter and new energy and claiming to be blessed beyond measure. Elizabeth commented underneath about how happy she was for him and how he truly deserved this joy after everything. My sister called absolutely furious, insisting I needed an aggressive shark lawyer to take him for everything he was worth, and then some. Everyone around me had advice and opinions. Everyone thought they knew exactly what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who'd given up completely, who couldn't fight back, who was letting her husband walk all over her without any resistance whatsoever. Everyone was completely and totally wrong about everything. Here's the thing about being consistently underestimated by everyone around you. People stop watching you carefully. They stop being cautious in their actions around you. They stop guarding their deepest secrets and their most vulnerable information. And that's exactly when you have the perfect opportunity to learn everything you need to know to destroy them. 3 years, that's how long I'd been carrying this devastating secret around like a weight. That's how long I'd known the absolute truth about Daniel Wilson and his glittering, glamorous, completely fake empire built on lies. It started on a random Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce announcement. Daniel was working late again, which was becoming his standard pattern by then, though I didn't yet understand what working late really meant in his world. I was going through the company books as usual, reconciling accounts and doing the unglamorous, tedious work that kept his business functioning and running smoothly. That's when I stumbled across something strange that didn't make sense. A significant transfer to an account I didn't recognize at all. Then another suspicious transfer. Then a disturbing pattern emerging. Money was flowing out of our various accounts like water into places I'd never seen before in all my years managing the books. I dug deeper into the records, staying up until 3 in the morning, following the increasingly complex trail. What I found made my blood run absolutely cold. Daniel had been systematically taking loans against everything we owned. Our beautiful house that everyone admired and envied had not 1, not 2, but 3 separate mortgages on it. The original loan was $400,000, which I knew about. A second mortgage of $350,000 had been taken out 4 years ago without my knowledge. A third mortgage of another $350,000 had been taken out 2 years ago, also without my knowledge or consent. The total owed was $1.1 million, but the actual current market value of the house was only $850,000. We were underwater by $250,000 on a home I genuinely thought we owned outright. The business situation was even worse than the house. Lines of credit were completely maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes owed totaled $85,000. Vendor debts had accumulated to $120,000. Equipment loans added another $75,000. The company Daniel constantly bragged about at every social gathering and party, the company that was supposedly thriving and growing, was actually drowning in nearly $500,000 of crushing debt. Even our 3 cars weren't actually real assets we owned. All 3 were leased with massive balloon payments coming due soon. We didn't actually own a single thing of value. We just had very expensive monthly financial obligations and the illusion of wealth. I sat in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, surrounded by damning printouts, and did the brutal math. Total debt was approximately $1.9 million, while total actual asset value was maybe $1.6 million at most. We were $300,000 in the hole, possibly significantly more depending on current market conditions. But where had all that borrowed money actually gone? I kept digging methodically over the following weeks and traced every single transaction I could locate. The picture that emerged was absolutely devastating to see. Cryptocurrency investments had lost $180,000, all gone completely. Gambling debts had cost $75,000, vanished into casinos and online betting. An apartment I didn't know existed, rented for a woman I didn't know about, had consumed $60,000 in rent payments and furnishings. Lifestyle expenses that never made it home to our family, expensive watches and designer suits and luxury trips I was never invited on, had cost another $85,000 minimum. My husband wasn't building a real estate empire at all. He was building an elaborate house of cards using borrowed cards that were also actively on fire. We looked rich and successful, the same way a department store mannequin looks alive, convincing and impressive from a distance, but completely hollow and empty up close. My very first instinct was to confront him immediately, to scream and cry and demand answers and explanations for this betrayal. But I knew Daniel intimately after all these years, and I'd watched him operate and manipulate for too long. If I confronted him directly, he'd twist everything around and manipulate me emotionally. He'd explain it all away with smooth words, make me feel crazy and irrational for even questioning him and his business decisions. He'd probably find some creative way to blame me for his failures, and much worse, if he knew that I knew the truth, he might try to take control of my separate money too, the funds I'd carefully protected. You see, I'd always kept something of my own, following my grandmother's persistent advice about financial independence. My retirement account from my law firm years had been carefully rolled over when I quit, but I'd never touched a single dollar. By that point, it had grown steadily to about $180,000. That money was mine, earned from my own job, completely separate property under the law. Then there was my grandmother herself and her final gift to me. She'd passed away peacefully when I was 28 years old, and she'd left me $340,000 in her will. Her instructions were crystal clear and specific. This money is for Sophia alone, not for anyone else. I'd kept it in a completely separate account for 6 years, never mixing it with Daniel's finances, never using it for household expenses or his business needs. My grandmother had maintained her own independent account for 50 years of marriage. Not secret money, she'd always carefully say, just mine. She was the smartest woman I ever knew in my life, so I had roughly $520,000 that was completely, legally, indisputably mine under any interpretation of the law. Instead of confronting Daniel about his lies and deception, I protected myself and my son's future. I worked closely with my uncle, who was a retired accountant, to create an irrevocable trust specifically for John's benefit. My entire retirement account and my full inheritance went directly into that protected trust structure. My name wasn't listed on it as a beneficiary. Daniel's name certainly wasn't anywhere on it. It was established established solely for John's future needs, for college expenses, for a first home down payment, for emergencies. And most importantly, it was completely untouchable by Daniel or any divorce proceedings. Then I meticulously documented absolutely everything I'd discovered, every mortgage document, every hidden account statement, every suspicious transaction, every lie. I printed multiple copies and kept one complete set at my sister's house for safekeeping. I put another full set of copies in a safe deposit box at a bank across town. I saved everything digitally on an encrypted drive with backup copies. And then I settled in to wait patiently. I knew with absolute certainty that Daniel would leave eventually. Men exactly like him always do. They get bored with their current situation, or they find someone younger and more exciting, or they decide they deserve more than what they have. I just had to be completely ready and prepared when that inevitable moment finally happened. 3 long years of waiting and watching, 3 years of watching him dig the financial hole deeper and deeper, 3 years of smiling at dinner parties and social events while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand that would collapse at any moment. I got very good at patience and very good at pretending I didn't know my husband was financially drowning us both. When Daniel finally asked for the divorce and confidently demanded the house and the cars and the business and everything else, I almost laughed out loud right in his face. He wasn't asking for valuable assets at all. He was demanding crushing debt and financial ruin. He just didn't know it yet and wouldn't until it was far too late. Back in the present moment, I sat across from Sophia Robinson and calmly placed 3 thick binders on her desk containing 3 years of carefully collected evidence. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account record was there. She read in complete silence for almost an hour straight. When she finally looked up from the documents, her entire expression had completely transformed into something new. She asked in an awed voice if I'd known about all of this for 3 full years. I explained that I'd been waiting patiently for him to leave, knowing with certainty he eventually would, and when he demanded everything so arrogantly, he was actually demanding all the debt without understanding what that truly meant. Sophia leaned back in her chair and the pity was completely gone from her eyes, replaced with something that looked a lot like genuine awe and professional respect. She understood immediately that when I signed over all the assets to him, I'd walk away completely clean while he got stuck with all the mortgages, all the business debts, and all the lease obligations. Everything would become his sole legal responsibility. My inheritance and retirement account were separate property, never mixed with marital funds, sitting safely protected in a trust for my son's future that Daniel couldn't touch. The trap was already perfectly built and ready to spring. The numbers were all verified and accurate. The documentation was legally airtight. All I had to do now was let Daniel think he was winning everything he wanted, and nobody in the entire world does gracious loser better than a woman who's been practicing that role for 15 solid years.